And those men took me, and they carried me up to the fourth heaven, and they showed me there all the movements and sequences, and all the rays of solar and lunar light. And I measured their movements, and I compared their light. And I saw that the sun has a light 7 times greater than the moon. And I saw his circles and his wheels, on which he always goes, going past always like the wind, with quite marvelous speed. And his coming and his return give him no rest, day and night. And 4 great stars, each having 1,000 stars under it on the right-hand side of the sun's chariot, and 4 on the left-hand side, each one having 1,000 stars under it, altogether 8,000, going with the sun perpetually. And 150,000 angels accompany him in the daytime, and at night 1,000. And 100 angels go in front of the sun's chariot, 6-winged, in flaming fire. And I looked and saw flying spirits, the solar elements called phoenixes and chalcedras, strange and wonderful, for their form was that of a lion, their tail that of and their head that of a crocodile. Their appearance was multicolored, like a rainbow. Their size was 900 measures. Their wings were those of angels, but they had 12 wings each. They accompany and run with the sun, carrying heat and dew and whatever is commanded them from God. Thus he goes through a cycle, and he goes down and he rises up across the sky and beneath the earth with the light of his rays, and he was there on track unceasingly. And those men carried me away to the east of that heaven, and they showed me the solar gates through which the sun comes out, according to the appointment of the seasons, and according to the phases of the moon, for the entire year, and according to the number on the horologe, day and night. And I saw 6 open gates, each gate having 61 stadia and a quarter of a stadium. And I figured out their size to be so much, through which the sun comes out and goes off to the west. And it becomes even, and goes in through all the months. And the first gate he comes out for 42 days, the second 35 days, the third 35 days, the fourth 35 days, the fifth 35 days, the sixth 42 days. And then once more he does an about turn and goes back the other way, from the 6th gate, according to the round of the seasons. And he goes in through the 5th gate, 35 days, the 4th, 35 days, the 3rd, 35 days, the 2nd, 35 days. And so the days of the whole year are completed, according to the cycle of the 4 seasons. And then those men carried me away to the west of the heaven, and they showed me 6 large open gates corresponding to the circuit of the eastern gates opposite them, where the sun sets according to the number of the days, 365 1/4. Thus he goes back once again to the eastern gates, under the earth. And when he goes out from the western gates, he takes off his light, the splendor which is his radiance, and 400 angels take his crown and carry it to the Lord. For since his shining crown is with God, with 400 angels guarding it, the sun turns his chariot around and goes back under the earth on wheels, without the great light which is his great radiance and ornament. And he remains for 7 great hours in night, and the chariot spends half its time under the earth. And when he comes to the eastern approaches in the 8th hour of the night, and the angels, the 400 angels, bring back the crown and crown him. And his brightness and the shining of his crown are seen before sunrise, and the sun blazes out more than fire does. And then the solar elements, called phoenixes and chalcedras, burst into song. That is why every bird flaps its wings, rejoicing at the giver of light, and they burst into song at the Lord's command. The light giver is coming, to give radiance to the whole world, and the morning watch appears, which is the sun's rays. And the sun comes out over the face of the earth and retrieves his radiance to give light to all the face of the earth. And they showed me this calculation of the sun's movement, and the gates by which he goes in and goes out. For these are the great gates which God created to be an annual horologe. This is why the sun has the greater heat, and the cycle for him goes on for 28 years, and begins once more from the start. And another calculation those men showed me, that of the moon in all the movements and phases, and 12 big gates crowned from the west to the east, through which the moon goes in and goes out, in accordance with the regular seasons. She goes in by the first western gate, in the place of the sun. By the first gate for 31 days exactly, the second for 35 days exactly, the third for 30 days exactly, the fourth for 30 days exactly, the fifth for 31 days extraordinarily exactly, the sixth for 31 days exactly, the seventh for 30 days exactly, the eighth for 31 days extraordinarily, the ninth for 31 days accurately, the 10th for 30 days exactly, the 11th for 31 days exactly, the 12th for 22 days exactly. Thus, likewise, by the western gates, in accordance with the cycle, and in accordance with the number of the eastern gates. And thus she goes and completes the solar year, 365 and 1/2 of 1 day. But the lunar year has 354, making 12 months, calculated in accordance with 29 days, and it lacks 12 days of the solar cycle, which are the lunar epochs for each year. Also the great cycle contains 532 years. It passes by the quarters for 3 years, and the fourth completes it exactly. For this reason they are taken away outside heaven for 3 years, and they are not added to the number of the days, because these ones change the seasons of the year, 2 new moons in augmentation, 2 others in diminution. And when the western gates are completed, she turns around and goes to the eastern ones with her light. Thus she goes day and night in accordance with the heavenly cycles, lower than all the cycles, swifter than the heavenly winds, and spirits and elements and flying angels with 6 wings to each angel. And the moon has a 7-fold intercalation, and a period of revolution of 19 years, and she begins once again from the start. In the middle of the heaven I saw armed troops, worshipping the Lord with tympani and pipes and unceasing voices, and pleasant and unceasing and various songs, which it is impossible to describe. And every mind would be quite astonished, so marvelous and wonderful is the singing of these angels. And I was delighted listening to them. And those men took me up on their wings and placed me on the 5th heaven, and I saw there many innumerable armies called Grigori, and their appearance was like the appearance of a human being, and their size was larger than that of large giants, and their faces were dejected, and the silence of their mouths was perpetual, and there was no liturgy in the 5th heaven. And I said to the men who were with me, what is the explanation that these ones are so very dejected, with their faces miserable and their mouths silent? And why is there no liturgy in this heaven? And those men answered me, these are the Grigori, who turned aside from the Lord, 200 myriads together with their prince Sataniel, and similar to them are those who went down as prisoners in their train, who are in the 2nd heaven imprisoned in great darkness. And 3 of them descended to the earth from the Lord's throne onto the place Hermon. And they broke the promise on the shoulder of Mount Hermon. And they saw the daughters of men, how beautiful they were. And they took wives for themselves, and the earth was defiled by their deeds. And the wives of men created great evil, who in the entire time of this age acted lawlessly, and practiced miscegenation, and gave birth to giants and great monsters and great enmity. And that is why God has judged them with a great judgment, and they mourn their brothers, and they will be outraged on the day of the Lord. And I saw it said to the Grigori, I have seen your brothers and their deeds and their torments and their great prayers, and I have prayed for them. But the Lord has sentenced them under the earth until heaven and earth are ended forever. And I said, why are you waiting for your brothers, and why don't you perform the liturgy before the face of the Lord? Start up your liturgy and perform the liturgy before the face of the Lord, so that you do not enrage your Lord God to the limit. And they responded to my recommendation, and they stood in 4 regiments in this heaven. And behold, while I was standing with those men, 4 trumpets trumpeted in unison with a great sound. And the Grigori burst into singing in unison, and their voice rose in front of the face of the Lord, piteously and touchingly. And those men took me from there, and they carried me up to the 6th heaven. And I saw there 7 groups of angels, brilliant and very glorious. And their faces were more radiant than the radiance of the sun, and there was no difference between their faces, or in their dimensions, or in the style of their clothing. And these groups carry out and carefully study the movements of the stars, and the revolution of the sun, and the phases of the moon, and the well-being of the cosmos. And when they see any evil activity, They put the commandments and instructions in order, and the sweet choral singing in every kind of glorious praise. These are the archangels, who are over the angels, and they harmonize all existence, heavenly and earthly.